As human beings, we have always wanted to fly like birds. And before we understood gravity, we tried everything. We tried jumping off from cliffs. We tried building different kind of planes. We tried attaching wings to devices and trying to fly. We tried to glide. But until we understood gravity, we could not build a proper spaceship. We could not really fly as a human species. And gravity is one such law, right, which doesn't care about whether you know it or not, whether you understand it or not, because it already always operates under the surface. No matter who you are, no matter what you do, gravity is always there. You don't have to believe in it. If you are unaware of that, you are at the mercy of it. You are at the effect of it. But when you become aware of gravity, you can actually do something about it. You can actually design, you can engineer around it to build spaceships which have taken us to the moon and which will very soon probably take us to Mars also. But all of that is not possible without understanding a fundamental law behind flight, which is gravity. And when we don't understand gravity, we can spend all our time and energy fighting against it and forcing against gravity, but we will not hit success. We will not achieve what we are aiming for. But when we understand gravity, we can actually design, we can actually engineer our spaceships to move at the exact right velocity that is needed to escape gravity. That is the power of understanding a fundamental law like gravity. Because when you understand it, you can go to the moon. But if you don't understand it, you can continue to fight against it. I want to share 6 laws of leadership which are similar to these laws like gravity, which are always there under the surface, especially when we are working with human beings, especially when we are working with people in groups, in teams. They are always under the surface and they are always invisible. And they don't care about whether you believe it or not, whether you know it or not, whether you agree with it or not. They are just there. If you do not understand it, if you are not aware of it, then you are at the mercy of those laws. Sometimes you hit an amazing success and you have no idea why, but most of the times you are struggling against these laws and making your journey, making your path, making whatever that you're trying to do more difficult than it should be. And I want to talk about 6 such laws which I have observed and seen in people, in leaders who are leading beyond their organizations, leading beyond the companies that they are running. To give an example, I'm working with somebody for the last couple of years who is leading a 150 people organization. But more than that, this person is making impact to millions of lives across continents, across countries. And they are leading not just those 150 people, but they are also showing up as a leader beyond their company, beyond their organization, in the wider ecosystem, in the wider industry. They are working with politicians, they are working with change makers, they are working with other entrepreneurs, and they are working with billionaires, they are working with founders of non-profit organizations, and they're building a community. They're becoming a medium for a lot of change to happen, because of which their company obviously benefits. But what they are doing, you can call them they are leaders beyond the organization. In fact, it would be very limiting to say that they are leading the 150 people that are working for them, and more appropriate to say that they are leading beyond the organization. And these are the 6 laws that I want to talk about today, which are as fundamental and as undeniable as the law of gravity is in the world of physics. The first law is the law of listening, which says that all the power lies in the listening and not in speaking. And these laws are not laws of physics, they are laws of working with human beings. So every time you are working with human beings, whether it is in the context of a team or an organization or something beyond the organization, these laws are at place. And oftentimes we think that our speaking has power. But I want to address something more fundamental, that all the power lies in the listening. All results happen in the listening of people. And speaking doesn't matter if the listening of that speaking is not there or not exactly as you intend to be. And all your results, everything that you're looking for, every challenge that you're dealing with, I can promise you that the answer, that the result, that the outcome that you're looking for is not in what you say, what you do, but in how others are listening to what you say and what you do. Now, every time two people are talking, there are always three conversations going on. There is one conversation which, if you put a camera in a room, if you put a microphone in a room, the camera and the microphone would record a conversation happening, which are the words being spoken. But every time person speaks, they have something in their head which they are not speaking, and that is their own inner listening. And every time that speaking is communicated to somebody else, the other person is not just listening to the words which are being spoken and which might be captured by the microphone, but they are also interpreting that in their own mind, and they're listening to something else. They're listening not just to the words, but they're listening to the interpretation, to the meaning that they're adding to the words. And even right now, when you are listening to what I am sharing, you are also listening, not just listening to what I am sharing, the words which are coming out in the transcript, but also what you make of it. And the power of whatever that I am trying to do here, or the power of any communication, is not in what is spoken externally, but in what is listened to internally. Right? So anytime two people are talking, there are three conversations going on. One is the outer conversation, the external conversation, which can be recorded by any device. And then two conversations in the listenings of the individual people being involved. And the internal listening, what people are listening to, always matter more and always have an impact more than what is being spoken in words on the outside. So this is the first law of leading beyond your organization, that all the power lies in the listening. One of my coaches said that the real product for any leader is the listening that you're producing in others. And if the listening that you produce in others through your actions, through your speaking, is conducive to what you're trying to do, then everything that you're trying to do becomes easier. And if the listening that you're producing is not conducive to what you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve, then everything that you will do in the future or try to do in the future will be met by friction and resistance. Even though and even if you use exactly the same words in your speaking. As a leader, your biggest outcome, your biggest output is not the products, it's not the results that you're producing, it is the listening that you're producing in others. If others listen to you conducively, as a leader, everything that you're trying to do will become easier. If others listen to you as a bullshitter, as somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, everything that you're trying to do or say will fall on deaf ears, will not make an impact that you're trying to make. And this is our human predicament, right? We do not listen to what is happening around us. We make stories out of it. We make stories of the facts which are happening around us. And we believe those stories to be the truth. And then we forget that we actually made them up. We forget that we are the author of these stories which we are creating in our listening. To give you an example, the weather, you can measure it in temperature. So I can go outside and measure the temperature and it will show 14 degrees right now. And I go outside and I see the temperature which is 14 degrees and I make an interpretation that is cold. And I forget that I made the interpretation, that I made the story that it is cold, which is not objective, which is my own addition over the objective data point. And I think that is the truth, that it is cold. Now I meet somebody else and we can have a huge argument about why it is cold for me and for that person it's mild. You can see this happening everywhere. People are arguing not about the facts, not about observable words being spoken. People are arguing always and only about what they are interpreting in their own inner listenings, which are always subjective and which are always hidden from the outside world unless you speak it out. So as human beings, something happens, we make an interpretation about it in our listening. We believe that interpretation, that story to be the truth, and we forget that we made them up. And the outside facts don't matter as much as the story, the interpretation that we all create in our listenings all the time. That's the power of listening. Now, if that is true, can you see the power of that? Because if we are listening and we see listening as a creative act about which we have a choice, once we start to see that we are doing it, we can actually choose to do it differently. And now listening becomes a creative act. Listening becomes a generative act. And we can change something just by changing our listening. A client of mine recently asked me, how do I convince my hesitant boss? Now, where is the hesitant boss? Right? The hesitant boss is not a description of a boss out there. The hesitant boss is not a description or an adjective which is describing a person out there. The hesitant boss is only in the listening of this person, and they have unconsciously, subconsciously created their boss as hesitant. And if you have a hesitant boss, convincing them will always be an uphill battle, because you're trying to do something which is not possible by the way you're defining it, by the way you are actively creating the person in your listening. And if you see the power of listening, before you try to convince, before you try to pitch your idea, you can create that same boss as somebody else, as not a hesitant boss, as a person with an open perspective, as a person who is supportive of your ideas, as a person who is committed to their team functioning well. And when you approach the same person, not from a place of how do I convince a hesitant boss, but how do I convince somebody who is open and receptive and committed to their team being the best team, anything that you say will become easier. All the power in this example lies in your own inner listening, looking at what is the default listening that you're bringing to a conversation and changing that if that is not working, if that is not conducive given the result that you want to produce. So listening is active creation. We actively create all the time through our listening. And we can create something else or somebody else differently by simply changing our listening. I will give you another example. When I was working with Booking.com, I used to work with around 400 people from 70 different nationalities working in the same building. And any team would have people from at least 5 different nationalities. Now, every time I would open my mouth to speak something, depending on different cultures, depending on where people grew up, depending on the native language that they spoke, they made a different meaning of what I was saying. So I can say the same sentence, but a Russian guy would interpret it differently. An Indian guy would interpret it differently. An American girl would interpret that differently. A French person would interpret that differently. And earlier, when I started working, I was very confused because we were getting into arguments and we were getting into conflicts for no reason and for what I was not even intending to communicate. But people were listening differently because of their different backgrounds and cultures. What that did for me was I started to focus not on what I was speaking, but I started to focus on what people were understanding, what people were actually listening to. And I started to slow down and actually make sure that what I am trying to communicate is the same thing that people are listening to before moving forward. Instead of going around like a train without caring about what anybody is listening, I started deliberately slow down, double check and question, what are you listening? What did you hear me say? What do you mean of it? And only when everybody was aligned, we would go to the next step in the conversation. And that slowed it down, that slowed the pace of the conversation, but it sped up the overall productivity of the team because so many misunderstandings, so much repeated work, so much miscommunication, and so much of repeated communication was avoided because I simply slowed down, and all that because I could not trust what the other person was listening. I knew what I was speaking, but I had no idea how that was being listened to. And once I started focusing on the listening, immediately I could see that all the power is not in how smart my words are, how well phrased my sentences are, or how much data or how much smart my language is. All the power of my effectiveness as a leader lies in how well am I able to communicate and have other people understand in their own inner listenings what I am trying to actually communicate. That is the first law. All the power lies not in your speaking, but always in the listening of other people and your own listening. The second law of leadership is the law of giving, which says that the more you give, the more you have. Now, this is exactly the opposite of the normal law of mathematics and give and take. If I have 2 pens and I give you one of them, I have 1 pen remaining and you have 1. That's what mathematics is. And by understanding this law of mathematics, the whole of our economy and business works. This is how we do business. By understanding mathematics, that if I have a certain resource and I give some of that, then I am left with less than I had before, and then you have something. That's called trade. Right? The whole business world is built on this law. But the biggest mistake that I see in the world of leadership is people start to deal with human beings with the same law. What I am suggesting, what I am proposing in the second law is that in the world of human beings, it is exactly the opposite. That the more you give, the more you have, or the more you get back. And what is it that you give in the world of human beings? You give others trust. You give others love. You give others care. You give others listening. You give others respect. You give others authority, accountability, responsibility. And this law states that the more that you can trust others, the more people will trust you back. The more you love others, the more people will love you back. The more you show respect, the more people will give you respect. The more you give people power, accountability, and responsibility, the more people will see you as powerful, responsible, and accountable. In the world of human beings, generosity rules. In the world of human beings, giving and service actually rules. If you wait for somebody to trust you before you can trust them, you are on a downward spiral. If you wait for somebody to love you, respect you before you love them and respect them, you are on a downward spiral. If you wait for somebody to give you proof to be trustworthy before you can trust them, you are on a downward spiral. But if you can, on face value, start with high trust, start with a very high bar for respect, for love, others will reciprocate in kind. This is how it works between human beings. If I give you my trust, I do not have less of trust to distribute with other people in my team and in my life. In fact, I have more because I get more from you. The more I give love to you, the more I give respect to you, the more I feel loving and respectful, just even within myself and also with other people in my life, in my community, in my team, in my company. And that is the law which I see everybody who is leading beyond their organization and people who are leading beyond the responsibility that they currently have follow this law. They always give more without waiting for somebody else to give first. They always trust first. They always see others as champions first without waiting for somebody to prove themselves as a champion. And this doesn't mean that you cannot hold somebody accountable. This doesn't mean that you cannot lower your level of trust if you see the performance or the accountability is not there on the other side. You always have that agency to lower or to change how much you give. But the law simply states that the more you give, the more you receive back. So if you do not have something as a leader, if you think that you do not have listening, that people do not listen to you, start listening to them. If you think that people do not care about you, find out what people care about and start caring for that. If you think that people do not trust you, look at where are you not being trustworthy? Where are you doubting them? Where are you looking at them with suspicion and start changing that? The thing is, when we think that people are not being a certain way, people are not behaving in a certain way, we think that we are describing the people, but we are actually projecting our inner state onto them. And we are always getting what we have been giving in the past. So if you do not have a particular attribute like trust, like a relationship, Look at the past and see where do you see symptoms or where do you see examples of you actually doing something or laying seeds for that lack of respect or trust right now in the present. The key aspect of this law is to realize that we are the source of leadership. In the mathematical world, in the economical world, we measure, we count, we trade resources. We are not the source of it. In the human world, when it comes to love, trust, relationships, kindness, caring, accountability, team spirit, we are the source. We can create more love, we can create more caring, more listening, more trust, and give it to others without anything being depleted. That's the realization. We are the source. In the world of human beings, we are not dealing with a scarce resource. We are the source, and we can generate an endless amount of these human elements which allow us to build teams and allow us to build families and work together and live together as human beings. So this law forces you to recognize all the buzzwords that we normally associate with leaders. Diversity, equity, inclusion, listening, trust, all the buzzwords is actually something that we are the source of. We can always choose to be more diverse, to be more inclusive, to be more courageous, and we will get more of that in return from the other side. That's the second law, the law of giving. The third law of leadership is the law of responsibility. It says that responsibility is always unconditional and always 100%. Let me share what I mean by responsibility being unconditional. And normally and so often, I see people putting a cost to them being responsible to something else out there. That I will be responsible if this condition is met, or if this person shows up as that, or if my team does that, or if my company does that, or if my manager does that, or if I have these resources, or if I do not have this problem. Right? So responsibility, the law states that true responsibility in leadership is always unconditional. And what this law states is that we always have a choice. We always have a full and complete choice to take responsibility and act from that place without any blame, without any reasons, and without any excuses. What I am proposing here with this law is that responsibility is simply our ability to respond in this situation. When we say, are you taking responsibility of this situation? It does not mean that are you responsible for this situation being the way it is. It actually means that are you taking responsibility to act in this situation, and despite the reasons, despite the current circumstances. If you have to wait for circumstances to be different or for something else to be different before you take on responsibility, what kind of leadership is that? Right? The leadership that I am talking about is always unconditional and is always despite the reasons and not because of the absence of any reason. Right? And this kind of responsibility is not about right and wrong. It is not about good and bad. It is not about fair and unfair. It is about a choice, because that is the only way that works. We can give up responsibility or we can take responsibility. Anytime, it is only our choice. And why we choose responsibility or why we can choose responsibility? Because it is the only way that works when it comes to leadership and producing the results that you want to produce. And once again, responsibility is not blame. Right? So when we say you are responsible, we don't say you are to blame for that situation. That's not what I mean. What we mean by responsibility, taking responsibility, is that you're responsible to act in the face of that situation, given the future that you desire, given where you want to go, individually, as a team, as an organization, and then also beyond the organization, as an industry, as a society, as an ecosystem, and so on. The second element about responsibility is that responsibility is always 100%, never less and never more. Which simply means that if there are two people involved, the total responsibility is 200%, 100% of each person, and not 50-50. If I'm leading a team of 5 people, then the total responsibility of the entire team of 5 people is 500%, and not 100% divided among the 5 people. And oftentimes we lower our responsibility when we see somebody else not taking responsibility. We say that I'm stepping down now and I will only step up, or I will only do this when you also take up that responsibility. And once again, if we do that, then we end up in a negative spiral, a downward spiral, where eventually everybody will end up with 0% responsibility and only blame and only a mood of resignation and resentment. But no results, no leadership is possible in that space. Leadership, real leadership, when we talk about leading beyond the organization, is when you keep your share of responsibility at 100% and also ask others to step there up to 100% when you see them dropping down. But you're not dropping your own, and only that will allow you to actually hold others accountable or to empower them, support them to step up to that maximum ability that we can have. It is also very important to understand that extending your responsibility beyond 100% is also not leadership the way I'm talking about. And it is so easy, especially for high performers, to step in and actually take on additional responsibility for somebody else when you see somebody else going down. This is not what we are talking about. You become a victim when you drop your responsibility below 100%. Similarly, you become a hero or a martyr when you extend your responsibility above 100%. And both of these are not sustainable, not beneficial to the team, to what you're trying to achieve in the long run. Both of these, reducing your responsibility less than 100% as well as increasing it more than 100% and starting fixing things for others and not holding them accountable, not asking them to step up, is as damaging as becoming a victim and giving reasons and excuses of why a result is not being produced. So when it comes to results, it is very black and white. You either have the results or you have the reasons. Responsibility is simply, at any given moment, always looking for the next step to produce the results that you want to produce. And in my world, that's leadership. That's why this law is so powerful. And if you're thinking, why me? Or why do I have to take responsibility? Why do I have to choose leadership when others do not? The answer to that is that you don't have to. Nobody is asking you to, but it is a choice. It is the only choice which works best. If becoming a victim would work better for producing results, I would actually be advocating for that. But in any given situation, you only have 3 choices. Either you can quit, either you can go away, give away your responsibility, or you can complain or blame. You can see something and you can point that because of this, I'm not able to take responsibility or produce the results that I'm able to produce. And the only option, apart from quitting and complaining, is to take and choose responsibility, 100% responsibility. Those are the only 3 options that you have in any given situation that you find yourself in. So there is no obligation here. There is no burden. There is no heaviness in responsibility the way I'm talking about, because it is always choice. And you don't have to, and you don't become wrong if you do not choose leadership, if you do not choose 100% and unconditional responsibility. But in the end, it is as simple as saying that it is your life and it is your choice. If you want the results that you say that you want, then the best way of producing these results is to actually choose responsibility rather than complaining or quitting. And yes, pointing fingers outside or even pointing fingers at ourselves, blaming, gives a temporary relief and makes us feel self-righteous, which is appealing, which is tempting to our ego, because we can get off the hot seat, we can get off the saddle of leadership. But in the end, it is critical to realize that off-stunt takes us away and not towards the results that we want to produce. So once again, you only have 3 choices. You can either quit, you can either complain, or you can take and choose responsibility. And the choice is yours. Before we end talking about this law, I want to throw a provocative question. Any area, look at any area of your life or work where you're disempowered and where you're not producing results. I can bet that is a place, an opportunity to look deeper and ask yourself, where is it in that area that you are not taking responsibility. Any area where you're not happy, you're not empowered, you're not producing the results, in that area, somewhere you are not choosing responsibility. You're not taking 100% and unconditional responsibility. And often that might be behind our awareness, that might be unconscious and not aware to us. But that doesn't mean that we cannot look there and actually choose responsibility and start moving towards the results that we want to create. So if you find any such area where you're disempowered or you're not producing the results that you want to produce, you are avoiding taking responsibility, and there is something there which you do not want to face. It could be a belief, it could be a story, it could be an emotion, it could be something that happened in the past, it could be a fear, but there is something there which you need to face to take responsibility, to actually make progress and start to feel empowered about that same situation. This is the law of responsibility. The fourth law of leadership is the law of change, which says that you cannot change, motivate, or inspire anybody else, and you can only do that for yourself. This law states that all change and leadership starts by looking at yourself first, looking inside, and it is always an inner journey before any of the outer results start to materialize, start to happen. And it is so tempting to look at the outside world around us and say that this person or that person should change, or the situation should not be this way, or the situation should be the other way around. But the law of change states that all change starts by looking at oneself and changing ourselves. And that's the only place, anyways, that you have power. You cannot change anything else or anybody else. So looking to change, motivate, inspire, influence somebody else is so tempting, but it is a trap, because all change and growth starts by looking inwards and asking, how do I need to change? How do I need to be different? What do I need to do differently to produce the outside change, right? Because if I have to move my hand, I can only move my hand. If I want you to move your hand, I cannot do that. No matter how much I try to change, motivate, inspire you, only you can move your hand. And the only access for me to move your hand is to make a request. And that always starts by looking at myself. And if you are not moving your hand, it's not because something is wrong with you, because something is missing in my request, something is missing in how I am showing up and how I am inviting you to move your hand, that you do not feel compelled or you do not feel satisfied or agreed to do that. So stop trying to change, persuade, motivate, or inspire others. Stop pushing people to see the world as you see it, right? And that's why when you push people, they always push back. When you push somebody in your language, in how you are showing up, they will always push back. And the law of change says that the only change that you can do is looking inwards and changing oneself. And then that will create a space, that will create an invitation for others to change, but on their own will. And when you make a request, right? When you make a request, no matter who you are, no matter what title do you have, and no matter how powerful do you think that you are, others always have a right to say yes and no. Others always have that choice. You cannot decide for somebody else. You can only decide for yourself. And if you really want to change people, if you really want to make a difference, if you really want to influence others, then start by listening to what matters to people. That's something in your control. Start listening to what matters to them. Start listening to what they care about, what makes them happy, what makes them angry, what makes them frustrated. And once you find out what people care about, take care of that. And that might be different for different people, but take care of that. That's what you can do. That's a change that you have the power to take action upon. And if you can do that, if you can listen, if you can sense what people care about and start taking care of that and really see people for who they are and not just what they try to show or what is visible on the surface level, but their dreams, their desires, their fears, their anxieties. If you can speak, listen and connect to people at that level, you will find that people will change on their own will without you even having to sometimes ask them. And that is why change, motivation, or any such thing, any such buzzword in leadership happens automatically when you take care of these fundamental laws, when you take care of the law of change. Not by following any tips or strategies, not by following any 3 steps to make a difference or 3 steps to convince somebody. That's manipulation. If you sincerely, genuinely come from your heart and listen to people, changing them, motivating them, influencing them will automatically happen as a natural side effect of who you are and what you're doing. So once again, the law of change says that you can only choose for yourself. And similarly, others will always have a choice to choose for themselves. So you can never change. You can never change, motivate, or influence anybody else. You can only create the space by looking inside and doing something yourself, changing yourself. So you cannot directly change anybody else. You can only create the space for change to happen. The 5th law of leadership is the law of power, which says that power is always earned by you and granted by others, and never taken or demanded or forced. And power has become a dirty word these days in the leadership world, because normally power is associated by power over somebody else, the power of a dictator, the power of an authoritarian. But the power that I am talking about is not power by fear. It is power by caring for somebody. It is power by love. It is not power over somebody, but it is actually power to make a difference. And the way I see it, power is simply your ability to take action to produce results. And this has nothing to do with your title. This has nothing to do with how much resources you have, how much money you might have, or how much experience you might have. Power is simply your ability to take action to produce results. So coming back to the law of power, power is always granted by others. And if others grant you power, they can also take it back. It's very important to realize. And it's not the title. It's not in the title that power lies. It's always granted by others, irrespective of whether you have a title or not. So you might have a title, but people might take away the power, and then you can start to try to convince them, start to do what you're trying to do, and everything will become an uphill battle. Or you might not even have the title, but people might grant you power because of the way you're showing up, and any initiative, any new idea which you bring to the surface will automatically be received well and supported by those around you, because they grant you the power, they grant you the permission to influence them. But a bigger question than others granting power to you is that, are you even granting power to yourself? And remember, we can only act in matters where we have power and authority. In the previous law, I stated that I can only move my own hand. I cannot move somebody else's hand. And I see so many times leaders give up their own power, where they have complete power to do something. And we do not give ourselves permission to act in those matters which are important to us. So have you surrendered your power to choose? Have you given away authority about your life to somebody else? And there are 5 areas in which we always have power in our own lives, unless we give it away to somebody else. The first one is, what is our mood and emotion? Our emotion is always in our control, is always something that we can influence, something that we can create out of our own choice. How many times do we give up our power of being in an emotional state by saying that I am angry, I am frustrated because of this, or I am happy, I am joyful because of this person or that happened, instead of choosing the emotional state that you want to be in. The second element where we always have power is in the matter of our well-being and happiness. We always have that power to come back to our natural state, to simply take a few deep breaths and to come back to a natural state of peacefulness and happiness, no matter what is happening around us, no matter what the circumstances are around us. And so many times I see leaders who have given up that power to those around them or the situation as it is unfolding around them. The third is the power of choice, the choice to respond to what is happening. And so many times people speak like, I am unable to, I was not able to, I cannot do this, I have no choice, I do not have any other option. But we always have a choice. And even saying that I do not have a choice is also making a choice. So are you giving up your own choice to respond freely to the situation in front of you? Yes, you cannot control the situation, you cannot influence the situation or other people around you, but you always have the choice to act given the situation that is unfolding around you. Another element, another area where we give up our own power is our own worth and dignity. We put ourselves on a lower pedestal to others, either because of titles or because of money or because of some other reason, but we give up our worth and dignity. Many times the flip side of that is we also put ourselves on a higher pedestal than others, and we then to respond to them in a very different way. But our worth and our dignity, nobody can take that away from us until we give it away, until we surrender our dignity, until we put ourselves on a lower pedestal. Nobody else can do that to you. You might have different titles, you might have different salaries, you might have different amount in the bank account, you might have a different skin color, you might have a different nationality, you might have a different religion, but your worth and dignity is equal. And that is always in your influence. That is always a matter of your own choice until and unless you give it away. The fifth area where you always have power is to create the context under which you operate. So you can have the same situation, but you can create a context that this is a difficult time for me, or you can create the context that this is a huge opportunity for me. With the same situation, we always have the choice to create or to change the context from which we operate from. And more than what we do, the context determines the outcome of whatever that we are trying to do and achieve. And that is always in our choice, unless we surrender that choice, unless we surrender that power to others. And often people ask me, how do I increase, how do I amplify my power? And based on this law, based on the law of power, to amplify your power, start giving power and authority and help to others without wanting anything in return. Start taking care of what people care about, and people will grant you power. People will grant you that authority to make decisions for themselves. As we spoke about earlier, in the human space, the more you give, the more you receive. The more power, the more authority or responsibility you can give, you can delegate, you can have somebody take more responsibility, the more power you are going to get back just by the law of giving. At the same time, with great power comes great responsibility. If people grant you power, then that is also a responsibility. But responsibility more like a privilege, more like an honor, and less like a burden or a power. The way I am talking about is not a burden. It's not a weight. It's a choice that you're making. It's a joyous choice. It's a privilege. It's an honor. And yes, you have that responsibility, because if you act otherwise, people can also take away that power. So this concludes the law of power, which states that power is not power over somebody, power to make a difference, which is simply the ability to take action to produce results. And the more power you can give, you can support others, the more power you can get back. And the way that this law states, power is never an obligation. It is always choice. It's never a weight or a burden to carry. It's always privilege and an honor. The sixth law of leadership is the law of commitment, or the law of going all in, which says that all results that you're producing are a result of your commitment or the lack of it. So if you do not have a particular results, that's a direct reflection of a lack of commitment or going all in at your end. And if you have the results to whichever level that you have the results, that's also a direct reflection on what is it that you're committed to. Another way to say it is that all results are produced by your commitment or the lack of it. And it is never about the how to, because a lot of time people come to me with a question around how to. How do I do that? right? So they have a result in mind, but they are stuck because of how to. And this is very true for me also. For a long time in my life, I have been stuck. And even now, I get stuck in thinking about the how to, in thinking about planning, analyzing strategy, or figuring out what is the right way to go where I want to go or to produce the results that I want to produce. But what this law states that it is never about the how to. It's always about your commitment. And if you are asking or if you're getting stuck in the how to question, that means that your commitment is not there, that your commitment is missing. And the corollary of this law is that when you're fully committed, the how to's don't even matter. The how to's stop mattering. And I'm not saying that you will stop asking the question how to, because that's a very important question to ask. But what I am saying is that when you are fully committed, the how to's will not matter. You will not get stuck in the how to's. Without commitment, you get stuck in the how to's. With commitment, you don't get stuck in the how to's and you continuously keep on moving towards the result. I'll give you an example. When my mother was sick with cancer, you had no idea what I did to make sure that her treatment, that she was taken care of medically. I researched about cancer and I was very young. I was still in my early 20s at that time. I researched about cancer. I went to doctors, I went to surgeons, I argued with them, I fought with them. I took printouts of research papers on cancer for somebody who has no background in medical science and fought with them about what could be the best mode of treatment for my mother, right? So when you're fully committed, the how to stop mattering, right? I didn't knew anything about how to make her healthy, but the commitment was so strong that I found out ways, or that I created ways which were unimaginable. So when you are fully committed, you will think of doing things which you even did not even knew that you could consider, that you could think of. You will think and do things which are not even in your imagination, which are even beyond your wildest imagination right now. That's the power of commitment. I'll give you another example. I said yes to organizing a protest march in Bangalore in 2011. And the march was just 40 days ahead. And I had no idea how to organize such a thing. But the moment I said yes, the moment I committed, I did things in those 40 days which I did not even have a clue that is required to organize the march when I said yes to organizing the march. And these things included reaching out to the police, getting permission on the route, raising funds, inviting politicians, inviting other senior activists and prominent personalities, inviting TV channels, inviting newspapers to cover the protest march. So there were a lot of things that I did. There was a lot of resources which I mobilized in those 40 days to make sure that the march was there, only because I was fully committed. I had no idea what is required, and I went beyond what was reasonable at that point of time in my mind, because I was a techie, I was an introvert, I had no idea how to do such a thing. But commitment paved the way. What I realized was that when I am fully committed, I will do things which are unimaginable. I will ask people for things which I would not otherwise. And I wouldn't be so self-conscious. How to, the question about how to, or when we get stuck in how to, it's always coming from a place of being self-conscious. It's always coming from a place of being safe, or finding the right path, or being a perfectionist, or wanting to do things the right way. But when you are fully committed, you wouldn't be self-conscious. You would be almost surrendering or giving yourself fully to the commitment, right? It's a commitment which will drive you to action rather than you driving the action. That happens when you get fully committed. You do things, you ask for help, you ask for others to do things which are unimaginable. Another example is a mother or a parent's commitment to their child. If you are a parent, you know there have been instances where you have done things to take care of your child which are beyond your normal threshold of doing things. And maybe that's asking help from a stranger, maybe that's asking a family member to do something, or maybe yourself stepping up and doing something which you have never thought that you could do or you are even capable of. But that commitment, a parent's commitment, a mother's commitment for a child, can have you do things. It can have you perform at a level that you even did not knew was possible. Leave alone figuring out all the details, all the how-tos on the way, right? For a parent, there's no how-to, there is no manual of how will you figure out when this happens, when that happens. It's always coming first from the commitment, and then the how-to will take care of itself. So when we get stuck in the how-to, when the question that you are stuck is, how do I do this? What is the way forward, or what is the right way forward? It's something which is missing in your commitment, right? So when you're fully committed, commitment really means that giving something, everything that you have got, you are not holding anything back. Just to add on to this law, we are always committed to something. It's not like we are not committed to something. So we are always committed to something. The only thing is we are not aware of what are we committed to. And our results actually show us what is it that we are committed to and what is it that we are not committed to. Our commitment is visible more in our actions, more in what we do than what we say, what we speak that we are committed to. Especially if the results that we want to produce are not happening, that's a place to self-reflect. That's a place to self-reflect on your previous actions, on your behavior, and say, what is it that I am more committed to than producing this result that is leading me to where I am today? And for me, what I have figured out, what I have found out for myself, that I have normally been more committed to playing safe than to produce a result. I have been more committed to avoiding conflict. I have been more committed to people pleasing and to pleasing others, making sure that I am liked by others, I am respected by others, more than doing what is required to fulfill my commitment. And it is always a difficult moment. It is always a provocative moment when I am made aware of that. Many times, like through the help of a coach, who, like, I want to thank my coaches to continuously show me a mirror and tell me or show me that you're not as committed as you think you are. You're committed to something else. And it is very important to recognize that what is it that you're blindly or unconsciously committed to that is stopping you from producing the results that you are vocally, publicly saying that you want to commit to. So are you committed to produce the results that you want? Or are you blindly committed to something else which you are unaware of? Are you playing really to win, or are you playing not to lose? Before we end this law, I want to add a note around failures and mistakes. When we are committed, there are no failures, there are no mistakes. There are only actions we take and the results they produce. And those results could be what we wanted or what we did not want it. But when we are committed, there are no failures, there are no mistakes. There are just events happening and we just move on to the next event. When we are fully committed, we would not stop, call something a failure. We would not see something as a failure or a mistake. We would simply learn from it. We will simply take action. We will simply learn from it, and we will not get stuck in who to blame or like any kind of guilt or any kind of other patterns which are normally associated when we fail, when we use the word failure. So when you are fully committed, there is no failure. There are no mistakes. There are only actions which move you towards the result that you want. And even when you do not get results that you want, you still see that as moving towards where you want, right? Because failure or not getting what you want is just a part of the game that you're playing towards producing a result. So when you are fully committed, you do not interpret, you do not make anything that happens mean that something is wrong, either with you or with the world, or that this is a failure or this is a mistake. You simply learn from it. You see that as part of the process. You see that as taking you closer towards the result that you want to produce. And then you keep on taking action, committed action to produce those results. That happens when you are fully committed. And just like everything else, all 6 of these laws, commitment also is a choice. Commitment is a choice that you always have in every moment. No matter what is happening around you, no matter where you are, no matter who are the people around you, you always have a choice to be committed to any result that you want to produce, that you care about, that matters to you. And then that commitment will create the way. That commitment will create path. That commitment will pave the how-to But in any moment, no matter what is happening, you always have a choice to say or to bring your commitment to the result that you want to produce. And often that involves looking at what you don't want to look at, which is what it is that you're blindly committed to that is stopping you from producing the results that you say that you want to produce. So with this, we end with the 6 laws of leadership, which will not just help you lead effectively in your own personal life, in the team, in the department that you're leading, but also these laws are instrumental when you desire to make a difference which extends or which expands beyond the company, beyond the organization that you're leading right now. This is actually providing leadership to the world. These 6 laws, if you can practice, if you can bring them into your daily practice, this will allow you to provide leadership for the world, for a wider ecosystem, for the society, for the nation, and for the planet that we live on. And these laws, just to recap everything, work exactly like the law of gravity. It doesn't matter, or these laws don't care whether you like these laws or not, right? They don't care whether you think these laws are fair or not. It doesn't matter whether you believe in these laws or not. They exist and they continue to have an impact, just like the law of gravity. Doesn't matter whether you see it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not, they are always playing a role under the surface. The only choice you have is to continue to ignore them, continue to be blind about them, and keep on living your life in that state of blindness, or to be aware about that, to see that this is why my results are not getting produced, or this is why these are the results that I am getting, and then you can choose to do something about it. You can understand these laws and you can choose to do something about it. Just like when you can understand gravity, you can build spaceships, you can go to the moon. Similarly, when you understand these laws of your leadership, you can not just provide leadership to yourself, to your family, to your team, but also to your organization and beyond the organization, to the wider world out there. This is an invitation. These 6 laws are an invitation to your leadership, to leading in a way which goes beyond the organization or the team or the immediate results that you want to produce. And before we end, if you're listening to this, then you have complete choice. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what country, group, religion that you belong to, you have complete choice. You are as much capable of exercising these 6 laws as any other human being on the planet. So this is my call to you. This is my call to your leadership. And until the next time, keep choosing leadership, keep deploying yourself. Thank you.